So, a dark and, well, admittedly minor insight that I thought about. You know how you have all of those different generational monikers? You have the silent generation, the greatest generation, the boomers, Generation X, and then millennial, then Generation Z and Generation Alpha. And it's something I've actually said to myself a couple of times. I've just never really said it publicly. My generation, specifically the one after X but before Z, which is often referred to as millennial, but really millennial comes after this one. Generation Y is, I would think the second moniker for it would be the forgotten generation, if there wasn't already a generation that was named that. I forget if there was, because they're called the forgotten generation. But there's a number of reasons why I think that term is actually fairly apt for Generation Y, particularly because they're lumped in with the millennials as far as what they were, and also because they're, I think, the last generation to be fully exposed to misdirection from left, right, and center that they couldn't really suss out until it was too late. Or at the very least, they had to be very on the ball to really recognize. And they were also the generation for whom the bill came due for the previous generation's issues and mistakes. They were the generation that when the can got kicked down to them, they had no legs to kick it. And so what all of the trash and crap that was inside of the can spewed out, dribbled all over them. And what exactly was that trash? Well, it was modern monetary theory, the idea that we can just print more money and that will keep us that will keep the economy going, which that has resulted in our inflationary situation. Now it was the any degree is a good degree, which for a lot of us it would take about 4 years, at least 4 years to realize that it was a mistake, closer to 8, because you'd have to go into the workforce and bang your head against it a couple of times, and that number would probably be doubled because your parents would tell you that no, 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 no. The It's not the degree, it's you. You're the problem. And to be sure, then we have the other one, which is specifically the you aren't the problem, paradoxically. The everybody wins eventually. And the you're perfect the way you are stuff, which unfortunately, the core truth is you're not perfect the way you are. That's why you're living this life, so that you can learn and grow and become a better you. That's kind of how it works. I mean, this is what this is what at least elements of the original sin doctrine kind of points towards. This is, all have sinned, all fall short of the glory of God. It basically means no one's perfect, and they're not gonna get anywhere. I think it was 21 Pilots that had a song was "Don't trust a perfect person," because they're lying to you if they're saying they're perfect. That's just how it is. But yeah, Generation Y was the forgotten generation because we were buried under the results of various economic and educational lies with regards to how life was supposed to go and how we were supposed to do things. Now, the other part of it is kind of a tough noogies thing because I know the internet came into existence during our lives, and so on a certain level, we don't have as much of an excuse, but at the same time, the actual resources necessary to put ourselves up such that we could actually get through, it was getting dwindling more and more. Now, that said, there are plenty who are in that generation to have actually succeeded. Those are the people who, specifically, I think one big industry that emerged during our generation was specifically truth selling. So specific with the fact that there was a ton of lies being put out, and they were becoming more and more obtuse, more and more abjectly visible. The idea of producing a perspective that made more sense and peddling that became a valuable thing. That's why Dave Rubin, Tim Cast, the Joe Rogan Show, and uh, I think they call him Cappy, but I think it's like Asshole Economics or something like that. Joshua Fluke, the Quartering. I think I already said Tim Cast, didn't I? PBR, and you know, what Steven Crowder, Jordan Peterson. Who else am I looking at here? Oh yeah, that one news anchor from Fox News who left and started his own thing. Of course, he's the one that I don't remember. um, but I digress. Truth telling became a thing, and I remember even saying as much during my years while I was in Seattle. This is like, look, if you've got truth to tell, you've got something to sell. You just need a proper platform, and you need the ability to actually get it out to people effectively. That was something that I understood, but I didn't know how to really capitalize it. And to be fair, the truths that I knew were secondhand. It was all from other people. It was rare that I had my own research to go off of, which at the time, one of the other, I will say, forms of lies that I ran into was the appeal to authority. And this is something that I had to fight against tooth and nail within my friend circles on a fairly regular basis. It's like, well, the experts say this. By what measure? By what proof? Like, it was a thing of where if somebody was denoted as an expert, it meant that they were above reproach. You couldn't actually look at the numbers that they were presenting. You couldn't actually compare the statistics. You couldn't think for a moment about the absurdity of the claim being put forth. It was just, the experts say it's true, so therefore it is true. Don't apply your discernment to this thing. And this is old hat. This is old news. All of this, because truth selling is still a fairly lucrative market, but it's getting pretty saturated. There's a lot of people in there now, and moreover, some of the truth sellers have kind of tarried over into selling the lies that they believe, and so it's really hard. It gets pretty interesting. I mean, who's to say that what I'm saying right now isn't a lie that I believe? That's why I counsel you to build up your discernment, your truth figuring sense. And I mean, that's a biblical term, specifically discernment. Well, I mean, the word itself exists before then, but it's fairly commonly spoken about in religious circles. Even if it's commonly spoken about, but I feel like it's less commonly applied, where a person's not necessarily going to go through the book, the Bible themselves, and piece by piece consider what they're reading, or when they hear a statement about how it works, they're not necessarily going to actually go to the verse, then go to the chapter, then go to the book to figure out exactly what it means in context. There's a laziness there that I run into, but it's also a thing of well, not everybody's a hard study, so to speak. And I'm not sure if you can hear that back there, but that's the dog rolling around in the carpet. He just likes doing that. Anyway, so there's an element there of discernment. And what is discernment? Where does that come from? Well, it comes from life experience. And I mean, it is wisdom. It is, you've gone through a couple of things, you've been tricked a couple times, you've beat your head against certain things, and learned a bit or two. It also comes from eschewing away from stubbornness. So when you see something isn't working, stepping back and asking yourself why. And I could say that that's another reason. That's another reason why my generation, well, maybe Generation Y wasn't the proper term for us. Although at the same time, you could say that maybe it was. It was Generation, why is this happening to us? Like I said, we were the ones for whom the bill came due most effectively. Hello, Dallas. But yeah, so with all of that said, it begs a few questions like, well, if you're someone like me, I went to college for my first 3 years and I failed out, and then went into the testing sphere, trying to figure out how to get into the game industry, and learned that way about the full effectiveness of degrees, and then started trying to do my own business and started learning through very high impact lessons what to do and what not to do with loans, with investments, with credit cards, and taxes, and trying to avoid things like that. But with those high impact lessons, none of them were necessarily monetarily favorable, let's say. But that's a thing. Generation Y, I consider Generation Y to be the forgotten generation, because Generation Y isn't really talked about as that generation. Rather, they're lumped in with the millennial generation, which gets really annoying when a boomer or a Gen Xer refers to your generation as the millennial generation, because you were the transitional one. You were the one that started without the internet and had to acclimatize to this newfangled thing. And some of us acclimatize to it better than others. I'm not going to say which one I am. But Yeah, it's a different paradigm, to be sure. And it's like you go from Generation X to Generation Y. Generation Z is coming up. And I mean, I guess you could say Generation Y is the millennial generation, but the problem was that term kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and also it just had such a negative connotation. I really disliked it. Now, is this to say that Generation Y is entirely a victim? Well, no, not entirely. Uh, Maybe patient zero, but certainly not entirely a victim, because there was still the fact that we could work hard, do stuff. We could, if we paid attention to the signs, we would have been able to avoid a lot of things. And but again, we had because we had a generation above us that was inculcated with various things regarding the monetary theory that we're currently reaping the negative benefits of, and the political theories that we're reaping the negative benefits of. And it's just there was kind of a there was a how would I say there was that game of musical chairs that was being played with the economy. And once you don't have any legs to stand on, you can't get into the chair when the music stops. But anyway, I digress. So I mean, what does somebody do if they spent their life kind of banging their head against a bunch of stuff, trying to figure out how to make it through? I mean, the first thing is you have to not let yourself give in to any form of despair, because if you do that, well, that's it. You're If you let yourself give into any form of despair, then that means that you're probably going to shoot yourself within the next year. There's enough negative influencers and things around, that are being perpetuated, some purposefully by actors who just want nothing more than to make you miserable so that they can sell you product. Um, there's enough of that going around that if you allow yourself to wallow in your despair, you'll either become something very terrible or you will just end it. Neither of which are good things, and not what I want for you. So instead, if you've been tricked by X, Y, or Z, by teachers, by economy, by parents, even by church, and I mean, I know being a Christian, that's not a nice thing for me to say, and perhaps that's not even what people would consider kosher. But let's be real here. When they say religion is the opiate of the masses, they're not entirely wrong. But, or by your peers, even, who drink the Kool-Aid. Once you recognize that you've been tricked, you can use the fact that you were tricked as motivation and also a buttress. Basically, and this is something I've had to learn over time, because I've always been a very go with the flow, just let it slide, kind of person. But no, you need to allow yourself to actually be a bit miffed about it, because that will give you the motivation to say fuck you to all the people that lied to you, and say, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. and move on. The problem, now there's another problem that comes with this, of course, is you don't want to lean too far in the other direction, which is specifically you stop listening to anyone and just going on by your own intimations, which is also a recipe for failure. If you're going to learn from your own mistakes, learn from everyone else's mistakes too. And so it would be a thing of, again, building up your discernment and having enough chokta to stick to your guns when you recognize that something is untrue, and also being willing to not proliferate the lie that will allow you to stay socially viable, or at least allow you to stay in what would be perceived as a socially viable position. And that's tough. Now, I will say, even as I say this, if you get your chokta set up in a particular way, but you're going off in the entirely wrong direction, that can lead to some terrible fervors. Now, I won't refer to current day issues, or rather, I'd say one couple year ago issues that imitated the rise of certain communist regimes in other countries. But I can speak in broad strokes of the concept of where if you have that idea of the mob, right, where you give them a truth, and then you tell them a solution, but you don't tell them that this solution is specifically to benefit you. That's how you get people that are willing to ride or die for something that makes absolutely no sense. Or at the very least, something that really actually isn't in their own interest, even though they shout about it being in their own interest. That's how you get that. It's somebody willfully taking a truth that exposes an exploitation and then turning that into motivation to do something for them. And I can say that is amongst the most terrible lies that you can do. And I suppose I can just say it, if you happened to follow a group that purports to support, purports to support a particular demographic or that sort of thing, but then attacks that very demographic and destroys their means of survival, you're not using your discerning apparatus correctly. You just identified one particular truth and then thrown all the others away. And that's just not the way that this works. In so much as in the Christian mindset there is the truth, reality itself is a series of truths, immutable things that we know about how the world works. And if you just highlight one and worship at its altar, you will ignore the others at your own peril. And that is something to be recognized, that creates a lifestyle that is one-dimensional and also creates a worldview that is ill-equipped to properly exist. Now, I say all of these things And I might sound articulate and very smart when I say all of this, but as the dictum goes, if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? So I am not rich. So take my words with a grain of salt. As I've said this entire time, discernment, discernment, discernment. If when I say strikes you as untrue, look it the fuck up. Check it out and do some research and figure out whether or not it is. The internet exists so you don't have an excuse anymore. Even myself, I mean, I paid attention through a lot of the stuff, and I tried my hardest to avoid a lot of pitfalls, but the fact of the matter is I didn't really understand how to do things financially because that wasn't what I was taught. I didn't have a tradable skill because I wasn't told that that was a thing that I needed to do. And by the time I actually attempted to get a tradable skill, the walls were kind of closing in as far as economic and such. Not to mention, I had found that even in that space where it was, talked about go be a tradesman, do that instead of being a white collar worker, I found out that there was a different circle of hell over there. At the end of the day, it's not at the end of the day, at least if we're talking about lies economic, and specifically in the job space, it's not about whether you're working white collar or blue collar. It's about who you work for and what their intent is, and how they actually put it into play. If you work for a reputable blue collar group, then it's going to work out for you. If you work for one that's more about exploiting you and exploiting their clients, well, it's not going to work out for you. I had to learn that one the hard way, although I didn't quite fully understand what I was looking at or how to look at it. And so, for those of you who actually have children, there's a responsibility that you have that many who sired my generation and sired Generation X, and to an extent even sired the boomers, left behind, which is specifically, you need to be teaching your kids about how to do things, but the problem is that even as I say that, some of the lessons that our forebearers did teach us were erroneous in the first place, because a layer of discernment wasn't put forth because they trusted in authority. What was the term? I think it's trust but evaluate, I think is the term. Or you might get something, but you might get something and it seems correct, but you still need to look into it. Trust but verify, that's the phrase. But so that's the thing. So with all of that said, I think there's another thing that needs to be mentioned here, because I'm talking about the concept of truth selling, and how that became became more and more of a business, and you could say, in the words of Cappy, it's there is an arms race on the nature of things, like on talking about the actual nature of how to do stuff and getting ahead of people lying so that they can take advantage of those lies. So that's that is the thing there. You just need to think about what information comes through and comes to you. And so for those of you who are part of Generation Y, as in, why is this happening? um, know that at least I have some, what's the word? Oh, I can't even think of the word. You see, I'm getting older, so I can't even think of the word. I have some compassion for what you went through, seeing as I went through it myself. um, and I would I would hazard that for the fact that you might have been sold a pack of lies here, there, or here, there, or elsewhere. What I don't want you to do is become so bitter about the fact that you've been lied to that you let it shut you that you let it make you shut down. If you do that, then no, I mean, if you do that, then you don't get anything done. And at this point, if you've had a lot of your life go by and you weren't able to really get anything going, the best thing you can do is make sure that the next generation at least has a leg up on the scenario. I know a lot of people are saying Gen Z is the key. They are the future. They are what's going to happen. They're going to be the ones to save the day. But you know what you just did there? When you say that, you gave up your responsibility and you gave up your birthright. Like, you just let it go. You just said, Gen Z, have at. Take it. I don't want it anymore. I'm done with the struggle. And while I understand, it's hard, it's tough. Trust me. I understand that. But at the same time, when you are old enough that you might be lying on your deathbed, and frankly, a lot of us will be there without children. Do you want to be looking back and saying, I gave up this and I gave up that? I tried so hard, but nothing happened. And I just didn't go anywhere. And after a certain point, I just gave up. Or do you want to at least be able to say, I tried my damnedest, and maybe things didn't work out, but it's not because I didn't work, and it's not because I didn't try. Now, I will temper that with as they say, as Scrooge McDuck said, work smarter, not harder. If you find yourself banging your head against a brick wall and you're just trying to figure out what the hell is even going on, it's time to step back, take a break, get some perspective. Maybe change your lanes. Maybe figure out a different approach. The nice thing about our current era is, and I mean that there's a lot of rough things about it, but one of the nice things about our current era is that if you happen to land in the right spot, You can become a millionaire. You can become a millionaire very quickly. You just have to, but you have to find that. You have to find that angle that will turn you into that. Um, and it's usually something that's a little bit harder to discern, or something that specifically actually has a couple of lies blocking it. I think to things like the recent GameStop thing, which I, sad to say, I was in on that whole bit for a very long period of time, but due to life expenses, my diamond hands sadly withered, and so I missed out on the big gains, mind you. Now, I mean, that was due to a lot of FUD going on, and AMC itself having a head guy that was doing some terrible stuff. But yeah, if you come back to it, look, it bounced. You got that one brief bounce. Now, I don't know if that is. Now, the one issue here is for those kinds of flash in the pan situations, you have to get on board and get off really quickly. I mean, it's these sorts of things. It's kind of that pump and dump dealy. If you don't get off in time, you're gonna lose. And that's just a bit of wisdom that you pick up after playing with these things for a while. But you know, there's a lot out there that you're frankly being lied to about. And the hard part is going to be figuring out what's true and what's not. And I think one of the first things that you're going to really need to do when you're looking at it is look at the reality of things and look at people's lives who believed the thing that you're told and people who didn't. We have enough of a sample size of those sorts of things that if you actually take the time to look into it, you'll be able to figure it out. So I'm going to close this one out. This is a bit more of I suppose this is a bit more of a spicy take, but at the same time, people have had plenty spicier takes. I mean, yeah, plenty spicier takes. Any one of the people I mentioned earlier on who are actually specifically telling you what those lies are, rather than speaking about the apparatus you need to figure it out, both of which are important. But yeah, life experience, compare and contrast stuff, take your time. And I think that's one other thing also when it comes to this. You need time to contemplate. And that's really rough with the way things are, especially if you're a 9-to-5er. If you're a 9-to-5er, my first statement would be stop being a 9-to-5er. Figure out a way to reduce your hours so that you actually have time to stop and think. That's going to be tough. That's probably going to mean that you're going to need to do some freelancing. Figure out a skill that you've got that other people want. And if you're someone like me, who's just a talky dude, that's kind of be a problem. But I think you're probably going to need to go into sales, if anything. It's either going to be sales or writing, which I know those are both like soft skills and it's like hard. But I'd say like copywriting or just doing that sort of thing. Anyway, I digress. Find one of your skills and try and find a market for it. Fiverr, Upwork, and various other job board sites exist for this. Exist so you can do that sort of exploration. And I mean, if you're in a situation where you might have a few resources at your disposal, consider the elements of any particular market that you're interested in and look for the gaps, because uh, that's where your contribution that will actually make you good money can appear. And also, don't be afraid to take the low-hanging fruit. So this would be something as simple as, say you're doing a job and you make about $600 a week, and you hear people talking about a job where they make about $800 for about 4 hours worth of work. Use your discernment. Make sure that they're not lying to you. But at the end of the day, you can test it out and see if it's actually true. And that might be your start. And that's one of the things. Make sure that at some point you stop trading your time for money and start trading your skills for money, so that it's not about the amount of time you spent that gets you the money, but rather the difficulty of the problem that you're solving, or the nicheness of the problem that you're solving, that gets you the big bucks. Anyway, I'm going to stop right here before I say something that will truly get me canceled. So, ta-ta for now.